Hello and welcome to Introvert in Business, a podcast by me, John Baker, that will help you activate your introvert, unlocking the introvert superpowers within your business so that you can more confidently sell and network, that you can unleash more creativity and improve your business performance so that you get a better business.
Today's podcast considers the simple question, what is an introvert? But then goes on a bit further to talk about some of the problems around that label. And just before we start, if you want to get in touch to go into any of the subjects covered in more detail, please feel free. My details are on the podcast, and equally, if you'd like me to speak at your conference or work with your team to help improve productivity, creativity and profitability within your firm, I'd love to speak to you. Just before we get into what is an introvert, I want to speak for a moment about labels. If you give yourself a label, it doesn't mean that you have to do everything that you associate with that label. So giving yourself the label introvert, extrovert or anything else does not mean that's how you have to behave. You can choose to do otherwise. So in that sense, a label is completely useless. In another sense, it's useful if what it does is allows you to explain to yourself preferences and the way that you act so that you go on and implement strategies to change where appropriate. So I've interviewed, surveyed and worked with hundreds of introverts and of course a great many extroverts and more importantly a great number of people in between as well, because the two things are merely, in big inverted commas, two ends of the same spectrum. Now the interesting thing is that introverts, the term has been around for many years, and yet it gets thrown around in business. But what does it mean? We have many people speaking disparagingly of those that are too shy to speak up. And then there are many people that talk about those that are not as good in business, not as good as selling, not as good when networking. And in fact, 67% of introverts that I've surveyed say they're at a disadvantage in business. They clearly believe that. So let's pick out a few of these definitional terms that get thrown around. What does being an introvert mean? One of the common ones is shy. Well, actually, I don't think shy is anything to do with being introverted. Shy to me is being afraid perhaps of social connections or being afraid of speaking up, or at least uncomfortable. Obviously, there's different degrees of shyness. Now, this is not the same as introverted, although, if we think about it, many introverts may also be shy. Why? Well, if you are introverted and you've spent time kind of not spending time with people, then maybe you develop a behaviour which is avoiding of people, and that whole thing becomes in a big circle. Maybe you create your own shyness. But here's the point. There are shy, wait for it, extroverts. So one of my best friends is an extrovert very clearly, and yet she hates speaking in groups of people because she's shy. So shyness, not the same as introverted. One of the other things that gets thrown around, lacking confidence in group discussions. Well, maybe, again, there's some background to this, but fundamentally, an introvert is not somebody that has a lack of confidence. Introverts have just as much confidence as extroverts. It's got nothing to do with introvert or extrovert. So lacking confidence in a group, where does that one come from? Maybe because introverts are perceived as not speaking up, and therefore maybe they're seen as being people without so much confidence. Another thing that gets thrown around, introverts don't like socializing. Well, you know, and take it from me, a absolutely confirmed introvert, I do like socializing. I know many introverts that like socializing. In fact, I don't know anybody that doesn't like socializing. The question is who we like socializing with. But let's pick up on another one, energy. And this one often gets thrown around. And think of a rechargeable battery. From time to time, we all need charging up. We all need some more energy because the lives we lead take it from us. But where is the best place to recharge? Is it at home alone, or is it with a lot of people? There's your fundamental difference. An introvert is more likely to prefer to recharge the batteries at home, and an extrovert, much more so, recharges their batteries when they're with a lot of people. Because here's the interesting thing. Would you gladly, willingly, go out and do something with that you knew exhausted you without getting much benefit? As an extrovert, would you happily spend a lot of time alone? Introvert in a group? Probably not. So although introverts are happy to socialize, there is some kind of, let's call it, barrier. Then of course we're told introverts don't have a wide circle of friends. Well, consider that barrier again for a second. If spending lots of time with lots of people is really tiring, you probably wouldn't have a wider circle of friends. It doesn't mean that you don't like people, it just means you're not naturally going to develop a wide circle of friends. But it's not the definitional point of introverts. You know, the energy invested in getting to know new people may be really high, and perhaps you're just likely to spend more time with closer friends that you've already got. So yeah, it's an implication of perhaps being introverted, but not definitional. Another one, you don't like small talk. Well, this is really common amongst many introverts, although I know other people that don't call themselves introverts that don't really like small talk either. You know, think about small talk. Is it relevant? Is it pointless discussion, shallow discussion with a range of people? Small talk when with close friends, I often see, and other people that I've interviewed have said they see it as going somewhere or it's relevant. But when they're spending time having small talk with unknown people or people they're less close to, it's probably harder because, number one, they're bleeding energy, and number two is it's just harder for them, and it's what's the point is one of the things that lots of people have said. So again, it's probably an implication, although it's not a definition. There will be people that don't like small talk that are not introverts. So here's an interesting one. Processing time. Do you process internally or externally? As I was talking to a very good friend of mine, and as she said, I talk a lot and I do it to think. And I often say when I'm giving presentations on this subject, do you think to talk or do you talk to think? And how do you feel when somebody you know is always talking while you're trying to think? Now, they're probably not trying to annoy you, they're trying to think themselves, and extroverts tend to think by talking. It's the expression of the words that helps them understand the subject. In the same way as many introverts, when they're trying to think, they're going to sit quietly and process their thoughts externally before they go out and speak. It's not that they are afraid of speaking, but they want time to process those thoughts internally. And of course, another point that I've heard that perhaps follows on from this processing thing, introverts don't like having arguments, so they avoid them. Well, first of all, I think that's complete bunkum. Secondly, I'm not actually sure that many people do enjoy having arguments. Sure, there are some. So this doesn't make sense as a definition either. However, maybe it links to the internal/external processing thing. So again, if I'm having a heated debate, is that a nice way of calling an argument, with somebody, and they're just throwing out words in order to do their thinking, whereas I'm processing the words internally, I might always feel myself at a disadvantage. So that might be some reason why I don't like having arguments in the first place. So a range of things there about what is and it isn't an introvert. But when it really comes down to it, there's a couple of things that stand out. Firstly, the energy one. And that's not about a preference or anything like it. It's about where do you get more energy or where do you lose energy. Absolutely right. As an introvert, you can go happily and spend time in crowds of people, but it will be tiring. As an extrovert, you can spend time in those same crowds of people and it will be energizing. So that is a very basic definitional point. And the other one that we spoke of is about the processing internally or processing externally. So I hope that has been of some value to you, and certainly it's something that lots and lots of people just don't understand properly. Once you start to understand it, you start to realize some of the things that we can do differently in the way that we act in business, in the way that we manage businesses, manage our teams, and manage change. But I'm going to save those for another podcast. So for me, John Baker, catch up another time. Thank you.